Starting, and we're live. Welcome to Demand Utopia Live. All of the viewers that we've got right now, and all the viewers that we're going to have soon. So let's just do a little round of introductions to who's on the call. Just give us your name and any fun facts you want the viewers to know about you or what you're doing. I'm Ursula, early member of Demand Utopia, involved in a couple of popular assembly projects, which then spurred on creation of Demand Utopia through our many successes and failures through those. So glad to be on the DU Live, first time on here. And I'll just be kind of getting us through the agenda. Feel free to jump in with any comments or questions. And yeah, that's what I've got. I'll pass it on to Wishbone.
Hey y'all, my name is Wishbone. I'm a utopian and a Martian. I guess that's it. I can't really think of anything interesting about myself right now.
I mean, you're a Martian. That's pretty interesting.
Yes, I
had a handful of those before.
Yeah, I just landed a few months ago.
Welcome.
Yo,
over to AK.
AK here, B-boy.
Hey.
Recent member of DU. Still kind of finding my way around. I guess I'm kind of I'm into the cultural theory end of things, and hopefully I'll be able to contribute something to this particular topic. Mostly I'll just be asking weird questions that don't make any sense, but I'll try to help.
Awesome. And Eggs over there?
Oh yeah, sure. I'm Eggs, I suppose.
Oh yeah.
I was around when DU was started, and I have not kept up, but I'm here now.
Awesome. Hey, look at that. We got 16 viewers. That's awesome. Hello, 16 viewers. You're the best. Yeah. Let's see. I'm gonna see if I can see comments on the video or anything like that. That's cool.
I gotta locate some power real quick.
Oh yeah, locate the power. We'll get it rolling here in just a sec. The topic of tonight's discussion is what is Libertarian Municipalism. If you've got any questions, if you're watching, definitely leave a comment on the stream, and we'll try to get around to it. Or question, comment, link, do all that good stuff. There's only the 4 of us on here, so we need all your help also. Yeah, so I guess I figure we ought to just get right down to it, you know? What is libertarian municipalism? What does it mean? How did it start? How is it evolving? How is it relevant? How does it fit into the utopian politics? All of those are valid questions. Is it relevant? You know, it's been in a lot of discussion lately, so I thought we could just kind of go through our experiences with it, what it means, what we think it means, what we don't think it means. It's all a valid point. You know, no extreme theoretical comprehension required for the discussion. It's all on the table, and we're all learners. So,
Perfect.
Does anyone want to take a few first comments at that? Any of those questions sound interesting?
Well, defining what it is exactly is kind of still important to me. Because, you know, there's communalism and then there's libertarian municipalism.
Yeah.
And
What's the difference?
Yeah, I mean, I think libertarian municipalism is enfolded within communalism, but in a lot of ways, it seems to me that libertarian municipalism isn't really a political philosophy. It's, let's say, communalism covers the kind of economic and political philosophy end. But libertarian municipalism, as far as I gather, it's more of the strategy for implementing that.
Yeah,
So
that's a good.
It's a strange distinction, but it's kind of important, I think.
Yeah, so I've got a little bit to say on that. This summer, I and a couple other Demand Utopia people went to the Fearless Cities Summit in New York City. It was put on by people from Cooperation Jackson and from Barcelona and Camus. The theme of the whole week was getting, it was municipalism, fearless cities, and getting the experiences of different movements who find themselves aligned with the word municipalist and how that shakes out. And one thing that I think a lot of people came away with from that week was kind of sort of an ongoing question, continuing to wonder what is municipalism. I would say my impression from being there of kind of seeing the range of the groups or the spectrum of the groups who find some affinity with the word or the strategy of municipalism. I'd say it ranges from I'd say groups kind of like us who have a more like revolutionary dual power kind of perspective, more influenced by the history of social ecology, to groups like Barcelona and Camus who have a more like local politic, social democratic outlook on things. Still fairly radical for the realm of social democrats in Europe and elsewhere. But I think that was the really interesting kind of spectrum that we came to see of what people are doing there. There's people working in cooperatives. There's people working in different government agencies and planning. There's people working on the streets with tenants unions, homelessness movements, all sorts of things. And I think that's one of the issues that comes up most persistently when people are discussing and debating municipalism is the role of engaging in electoralism as a strategy. That was always a controversial point, even when Murray Bookchin was first writing about it. It was definitely never been popular with the anarchist milieu, and then it's always been too statist for the anarchists and too anarchist for the statists in a lot of ways.
So I guess it's necessary to like distinguish between regular municipalism and libertarian municipalism, obviously, because I don't think we want to argue about municipalism right now. I think we want to go with libertarian municipalism because, I mean, you can be a municipalist and kind of not be a communalist at all, as far as I can tell. And that's not going to work for us.
Yeah, I just bring it up because there's been some criticisms around recently, like there was a recent like interview with some people from Black Rose Federation where they were discussing municipalism and pretty strictly limiting the criticism to electoral movements that were somewhat influenced by municipalists but weren't actually on that sort of the libertarian side of it as much. So I think your point is really good, actually. Like, it's not necessarily a holistic political philosophy as it is a strategy towards building people power.
Yeah.
For a couple of reasons. That's kind of a question I have for the group. Is like what how do I say it? What aspects of the strategy proposed by libertarian municipalism drew you to it as something that you were interested in learning more about or pursuing in some way? I know for me it was just like I liked the it seemed pragmatic but also idealistic enough to satisfy kind of both sides of what I wanted to do.
Absolutely.
I got one.
Um,
Yeah, there you go. Wishbone.
One thing that that I really like about it is like, this idea of libertarian municipalism is like very reconstructive, right? It is very much about community building, and building relationships with people who live near you and in your immediate surroundings, who you can, fall onto for essential needs, right? Like, um, we in DU we always talk about the neighborliness, right?
Mm.
Neighborliness is a form of revolutionary relationship, and that our kind of like idealized neighbor person is basically like a de facto mutual aid node, right? Someone you can rely on for food or water or whatever, a ride whenever you need it. And in my past like community organizing, like so many people focus on the fight, right? The combative part of a campaign, whether it's against the oil industry or against neighborhood fascists or whatever, like, and that's like kind of like patriarchal in a sense, and then it's like, at least in the sense that like conflict and the idea of fighting is often associated with men. Like social reproductive part of revolutionary movements and theories, which is almost always overlooked because it's not masculine.
I mean, that's interesting to me, I guess. I think that part of what was appealing to me about it was like it's approachable and it's not something that I had to feel like I was putting myself at risk to do. Like it didn't feel dangerous. It didn't feel um like it felt like something I could do and not like be throwing myself into something that I wasn't ready for because I don't have the theoretical knowledge or whatever. And I don't have like or I didn't at the time have the like convictions that I think a lot of people who put themselves in other categories have. But I like my neighbors and I like, cooking food for my friends and providing mutual aid. So like it was a good spot for me to plug in to this kind of radical side.
Cool.
The way I came to it, I guess my trajectory is kind of like Bookchin's, in that I kind of started off like a Marxist and went towards anarchism. And I just feel like basically to me, every Marxist is an anarchist who doesn't know it yet. And every anarchist,
They're all wannabe anarchists. They
well,
just don't
it's just like,
believe in themselves.
if you don't, I mean, if you think your politics through to the end, I feel like it takes you there,
Yeah.
And, so every anarchist is a communalist who doesn't know it yet. Kind of. If you think your politics all the way through to the end, you have to come up with concrete plans. You can't just think about tearing down everything. You have to think about what's going in place of it. And this is just like the most, I don't know, the most actionable kind of strategy, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, I would definitely say like kind of the foundational sort of essay that kind of set out the idea was a Bookchin essay, Libertarian Municipalism, an Overview. It's on anarchistlibrary.org. You can check it out. I was thinking I would drop a couple quotes from that just because it's good. A couple things that I really like about the Libertarian Municipalist strategy is its It's based in sort of the idea that it's like a mix of prefiguration and pragmatism that really appeals to me. Like, here's something that we can do right now that actively builds towards what the closest thing we can imagine would be an actually like free society and how it would run. So it takes the idea of radical democracy, it turns it into a means and an ends, and I like it also because it's kind of like a mashup. It's a mix. It's a just sort of like mushy, complicated thing where just like a real city or a real neighborhood would be if you're trying to organize with people in your workplace or people in your neighborhood or people in your apartment building or people in your camp or wherever you are. It takes people where they are, and through the process of working together and building up radical democracy, I think kind of helps show people the sort of world that we might be able to build together. And I think a really important thing that gets done in the original essay is talking about it gets mentioned a lot in there, distinguishing the concept of politics and democracy from the concept of statecraft, and that's a really important one, I think, for emphasizing the libertarian or anarchist part of the municipalism. Basically meaning politics and democracy in particular, meaning direct popular control of society by its citizens through achieving and sustaining a true democracy in municipal assemblies. This as distinguished from Republican systems of representation that preempt the right of the citizen to formulate community and regional policies. Such politics is radically distinct from statecraft, and the state is a professional body composed of bureaucrats, police, military, legislators, and the like that exists as a coercive apparatus clearly distinct from and above the people. The libertarian municipalist approach distinguishes statecraft, which we usually characterize as politics today, and politics as it once existed in pre-capitalist democratic communities.
Yep. Yeah, so as a strategy, thinking of it as like a strategy, I mean, to me, the main components of it as a strategy is democratization and municipalization. Mm-hmm. So the point is to like you democratize the existing kind of you kind of get in there and kind of, I would say, kind of dismantle them or turn them on their head basically, so that they're bottom up. Mm-hmm. So we're no longer like fighting, unnecessarily fighting. Let's just get inside the old institution and turn it upside down. Now, there could be strategic problems with that, but mm-hmm. So basically you have democratization and you have municipalization of the city resources and infrastructure, like water and stuff or whatever gets produced basically on a large scale. And there's a lot that has to be worked out with that too, but those are to me like the two main ideas that are kind of that make libertarian municipalism unique, because the politics is not really anything new. Direct democracy,
right? It's old as it gets.
Yeah, these are ideas that Bookchin just mined from all over the place that have existed. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mostly he got the term communalism from the Paris Commune, totally. I'd say. And that's kind of like, it's existed through history as kind of a middle way, I think they call it, is like something between anarchism and, something between no state and the kind of Marxist model of a state. So it's the middle way, kind of.
Right. It's sort of like government without the state, or democracy without the state. We got one from Wishbone. Got a comment there.
Yeah, I just want to throw in, I think it's really important to emphasize the historical kind of context, especially in relation to like the classical Marxist and labor movements of the 19th and early 20th century. And Silvia Federici talks about this a lot.
Nice.
I guess wouldn't really consider someone who's very deep in the school of social ecology, but like there's a lot of overlap with anarchism. And
Yeah, definitely libertarian Marxist autonomist.
Yeah. But so she often talks about the role of the wider community in strikes, especially back in the day. And I'm really interested in this because it shows just how powerful this idea is when taken in connection with like militant labor radicalism. Because of course, like workers are not just workers, right? They're people and humans who need other stuff. And the role of production in the community actually in, like separate spheres, right? They're like production fits within the community and not outside of it. And when we're talking about how do we build like up to a major conflict with the interest with capital and the ruling class, like not just going to be the workers directly fighting them, right? Like, yes, that's an important piece, but everyone else in the community has a role to play too. And that's where like libertarian municipalism is super important, because when you have an active and agitated and pissed off community who's willing to back your workers, and workers who are willing to back the community against state repression, like that's a powerful thing.
Totally.
Yeah, and not just that, it sees like the individual as like, you know, is a multifaceted person, that not just, you know, the workers and then the people who live in the community. It's the same thing, you know? So it resolves that kind of unnecessary conflict between that idea of like this kind of pauperized idea of like the worker, you know, just that's all he does. He's a shoemaker. That's all he does.
Yeah.
Right. And that's why we started using the term neighbor as kind of a little shorthand for us, trying to popularize that sort of meme power out there. Is like, we're not just workers, we're neighbors, we're also like, you know, members of various things. We're hell, some of us are even gamers. You know, it's like people have multiple you know, hats they wear in society, and I think that's one place that, you know, a lot of people towards like the 1960s started seeing was like, as the labor movement was dying out, it's not just because of repression and not just because of shifts in the material conditions of production or whatever, but it's also just because of shifts in the way that people see themselves in society as, you know, like individuals with diverse interests. We're also musicians, you know, we're culture workers, we're teachers, we're all those things. I think that's one of the insights of the like Bookchin was having, but a lot of other thinkers were having at the same time. Like one parallel that we really like to draw in terms of like theoretical developments happening around the same time is also Huey P. Newton, chairman of the Black Panthers, was around this same period writing about, he was revising the Panthers' stances on internationalism and anti-imperialism, and began writing about something he called revolutionary intercommunalism, basically saying a lot of the same stuff, a lot of the old modes of seeing ourselves in society as just workers or members of various classes was starting to get a lot more mixed up. We had to start thinking about how we were changing political organizing to be more focused upon communities as a more sort of like full spectrum look at how we're organizing.
Yeah, and I mean, as far as I could tell, it's kind of a critique against syndicalism too. Because syndicalism is that same thing of like, basically you don't have a political identity except as whatever industry you're involved in, which is problematic for a couple of reasons. One reason is that basically it sets up this kind of industrial competition that you have to, like, the only way, like I say, the only way you express yourself is through your industry. So, I mean, you're unnecessarily kind of like in a struggle against other industries to produce more so that your community can become more wealthy. And I don't know, out industrialize basically other syndicates. And so it's just like it's just unnecessary. It's just kind of almost runs the risk of doing what capitalism is doing, just unnecessary production for the sake of growth and whatever, wealth.
Yeah, I think it's a really important point, AK, because, like, my experience in the labor movement is like, we want to a certain extent, abolish work, right? Like, we don't want to have to labor for 8 to 10 hours a day doing whatever the fuck the bosses want us to do, right? Like, in my mind, and this is, I think, calls back to what Ursula was saying, is like, this strategy is both a means and an end, right? It's like, we're building community so that when we do start to make those steps towards abolishing capitalism, we have communities to be a part of and celebrate and, like, be joyous for. And the more things we win from capitalism, the more that we can be fully realized members of our own communities and not.
Yeah, and also, like, production is reimagined in the scope of the community. So it's like, what does my community need? What do I immediately need in my community? Not like, oh, if we produce, 50,000 more units of whatever, we can have the capital to get what we need in our community. It's like, what immediately needs to be happening in the community? So there's no waste, there's no unnecessary competition. And also just, if you're going to have a syndicalist society, basically, using my shoemaker metaphor, your political group is shoemakers all over whatever city you're in.
Cool.
So you have, you have to, you have to get into groups with all the different shoemakers in the community have to get together in their group, and then whatever, all the carpenters get into their group. And it's just not, like, organic. It's like people should be able to roll out of bed, walk into the courtyard of their block, and that's the political area right there. All the people who live in that block, in that neighborhood, that's your community.
Right. Like, I think often there's too much emphasis on, like, the bigness of libertarian municipalism. Like, oh, we're going to have a big, citizens assembly or whatever running shit, and it's going to be great. But it's like, nah, like, the citizens assembly, the 99% of it happens, like, on the stoop and on the back porch and all that kind of stuff at barbecues, It's like, we only, it's like people can take care of their business at different levels. It kind of brings me, we got a question or sort of a request on the YouTube chat from Flame Garden saying, I'm hoping you'll touch on whether libertarian municipalism is necessarily geographic. Any comments on that?
Is it necessarily geographic?
I think they mean, like, sort of like the sort of like conflicting interests of the local and, like, broader sort of regional or that sort of thing. Often I think it gets brought up as just being like, oh, it's just a localist thing. Like, we're just going to have our own isolated little towns doing whatever, that sort of thing.
Well, Bookchin has a pretty strong opinion on this, I feel like, and I might not necessarily agree 100% on his opinion. I mean, I personally think that, self-sufficiency is, like, really key and important in this whole movement. You have to be able to ensure your own kind of basic needs in your area. because if you don't have that a little bit, you're always going to be subject to outside powers. You're always going to be threatened by, you know, whoever has a lock on certain resource or whatever. Bookchin has a different idea about this. I'm not totally inflexible on it, but so Bookchin feels like there has to be interconnectedness, you know, exchange of whatever resources between cities, communities, whatever, because otherwise you run the risk of kind of fortifying your city, becoming kind of fortified and kind of isolated and possibly having conflicts. I mean, there's people who know much more about this than me, but
Yeah.
I think there needs to be a little bit of a balance between that kind of self-sufficiency and still, yeah, we can get cool stuff from other places, trade with people, even fucking gifts, if you can imagine, you know, a sort of international gift economy. Let's give these people over here, like, you know, whatever, a couple tons of grain or whatever we have.
All
And
about that grain. You always got to remember
grain.
to keep an eye on the grain with socialist revolutions.
Yeah, so, or whatever we produce, you know. And yeah, maybe they'll give us some goodies in the future. You know, it's not like, it doesn't have to be a solid thing, but like, you know, if you have a surplus of something, it's like a hell of a good way to like make connections between other communities, to just give it away. But I don't know, I'm speculating here in a very utopian way, but
I like the sound of that. No, Eggs, you got any comments?
No.
Cool. Keep it up. Wishbone?
Yeah, I've actually got a little bit of thought on this. I think like I think there's a lot to be said from having like a strong sense of place, you know. Because in the end, we live in our environments, right? Like we
live in an ecosystem.
We live in ecosystems, and like ideally, we should be having strong connections and relationships with the other things in an ecosystem. But like at the same time, like I think there's a tension here between like this kind of like almost right. This tension between pulling right of like being like, oh, my place is the best place, and your place is not as good because of blah. Whereas like I think it's the really like liberatory way to frame this is like every place is like a really wonderful place for the people who live there, right? And recognizing those like interconnections like is really important. And I'm in the middle of reading Debt by David Graeber.
Nice.
He talks a lot about like how, you know, land-based peoples have interacted throughout human history, and it's really good. Like I think like, you know, the ideal of like very tightly interconnected and interdependent communities is a really utopian one, and like I like that. I think it's a really good thing to move towards. But you know, in the terrain of you know, our material reality might not always reflect that, and like I think, you know, it's something we should push for and continue to work towards and hold as an ideal. But like, you know, it's not always going to be the case.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it takes work. Yeah.
I mean, in the end, it's all about relationship building, right? And like, that's what defines socialism, or like, you know, most left tendencies from capitalism, right? Like, socialism, broadly speaking, is like us as people having relationships with each other, and you know, social ecology and other ecological movements also think like we also need to have relationships with the natural world that are mutually beneficial. I like that's kind of where I'm coming from, is like, you know, that very ecosystem kind of inspired web of relationships.
Yeah,
totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, that gives me a lot of thoughts. yeah, kind of one of the things that drew me to libertarian municipalism was like more of an understanding of, yeah, like the need to shift like, radical politics that I was doing away from just kind of like activist kind of stuff where we would be going for this or that demand, this or chasing after this or that cause, and start moving towards something that's more compatible with the kind of mass revolutionary politics that we actually need to change shit for real. Um, so like, words like base building I think are really important, in terms of like kind of what we're doing. It really kind of hits home in municipalist politics. Like I think like the elections and the institutional stuff are probably some of the weakest parts of the theory, but the strongest parts are the base building, and like the integrative, reconstructive, cultural aspects of it, which are helping us like actually build the kind of base of human beings that we need to actually form a movement with enough mass to actually fundamentally shift how we do things. I was kind of hoping too that could be kind of a segue. I wanted to talk, AK, a little bit about the really beautiful essay that you wrote a little while ago. Can hip hop save us? About hip hop and libertarian municipalism.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think, let's see. There's one quote I was going to pull from there. I think kind of related to what Wishbone was saying and what we were talking about too. Is like, and I think this is a huge. Basically, the reason I really love your essay, besides just being a big hip hop fan, is like it. I think it's really supplying a needed kind of like remedy to a lot of aspects of the left. A lot of times we tend to be in our heads or in a book all the time. And I think really bringing it back to the street level and to culture and to people's like lived experiences and needs and desires is really where this kind of politics shines, and where I think it really has potential. Is I think if it's going to succeed, we really do have to break out of just being in our heads about it. So I was going to quote something here. You said, knowledge here is inseparable from the body. It is confidence, it is self-respect, and indeed it is the ability to determine and even create oneself out of thin air. I call this peculiar sort of knowledge bodily wisdom, and it seems to me that it is the necessary foundation for any other sort of wisdom that we hope to follow. For it may well be easy to imagine a good life and to cite the path that might take us there. But what good is knowing even the best paths if we do not have the confidence to walk it? What good is knowing even the best sort of life if there is not yet a people capable of living it? I believe that hip hop can make such a people. Yeah, so it's just like really good stuff. I recommend everybody on the stream to check this out. I'll post it in the event description when we're done. Yeah, I was just hoping maybe you could just tell us a little bit about what you were thinking when you wrote the essay, what inspired you to write it, kind of give us a summary of what your thoughts are on hip hop, libertarian municipalism, culture building, base building, any of that stuff.
Well, I guess personal reason for writing it is that I just have always kind of had this chasm in my personal life between my passion for hip hop and my passion for, I'd say, radical politics, I guess, which is, they're two communities that seem really distinct and everything, but I don't know. I mean, I wrote my thesis on hip hop and kind of really drilled deep into it to find out what is like the real core of it. Because people talk about hip hop all the time and they bring up whatever, I don't know, fucking whatever's playing on the radio right now or whatever. And it's like, there's got to be something deeper beneath that kind of the aesthetics of what is hip hop. There's something more to it. So like basically I came up with this concept of the distinguishment between aesthetics and what I call the modus. And this you can apply, I'd say, to any kind of culture. Basically, when when people talk about whatever gangster rap or bling bling or whatever, or, that's some old shit. But like
They're all talking about SoundCloud and face tattoos. Get with it. Come on.
yeah, sorry, that's where we're at right now. Yeah. Yeah, when they talk about shit like that, they're talking about aesthetics. They're talking about a transitory phase in a culture, which is, especially in hip hop. Hip hop has no fixed aesthetic. If you look at it over time, there's nothing fixed about it, really. It's all that shit is just transitory shit. So everybody's always pointing to that shit, to misogyny or whatever, and saying, "Oh, this is what hip hop's about," whatever. But I mean, if you're really involved in hip hop culture, then you know that there's some kind of there's something deeper about it. There's this sort of way of relating to each other, and the way you relate to the materials when you're creating, that is something more foundational than those transitory aesthetics. And that's why basically hip hop travels all over the world, and everywhere it goes, it syncretizes with whatever culture it touches. And everywhere you go, it's going to look different. If you're in China, you're going to have all this kind of idiosyncratic Chinese shit in your hip hop, Mm-hmm. But what is really across the board is the way people relate to each other and to their materials. So, I mean, I have like a couple of different modices, I would call, of how hip hop operates, but some of the main ones are basically the cipher. Mm-hmm. Like there has to be this sort of relationship, this kind of circular relationship in hip hop where everybody kind of faces each other as equals and everybody has free entry to express themselves in a cipher. That to me is ground zero of what hip hop is. If you're not doing that, you're not really in hip hop. I mean, people can record themselves rhyming and shit and put it on YouTube or whatever, but that's not real. I mean, it's yeah.
Right, you're like rapping or whatever, but you're not.
Yeah. I mean, I love listening to good lyricism as much as anybody else, but it's not really hip hop. Hip hop is something that is lived. There's lived culture, and then there's kind of passively lived or almost dead culture. I would compare like the opposite. Like I wrote my thesis about comparing hip hop to the novel, and to me, the novel is like the antithesis of hip hop because you're basically in a seizure when you're reading. You're basically dead for a short period of time while you're reading a book. That's what books are, kind of. I mean, there's a lot of use to books, and they can lead you to a better life and everything. But that's what's happening there, kind of. So so there's a cipher. There's a couple other modices like the battle, like that's a main thing, kind of. That's basically how we resolve aesthetics in hip hop. Is you have to put up your personal style against other styles and have to compete.
It's the discourse.
Yeah, it's a dialectic, and that's how there's a documentary called Style Wars. So it's kind of like this dialectic that unfolds over time. And that's how styles come into being. And it's like an arms race, kind of. You have to continually kind of develop your style and show and prove against other people. And I mean, there's no one style or anything. It's always, every style is a niche basically, and the war is to pull the center of what's cool, what is considered hip, towards your personal niche. And so it's just a constant struggle like that, basically. So there's stuff like that. There's another modices to me is that it has to be perishable. Is another modices. So it has to, that's what a freestyle is. When you it's the difference between a freestyle and a recorded piece of hip hop. Is that, you know, it has to be off the top of your head, kind of, to be really like that, have that relational quality to it. Otherwise, it's just a dead thing, you know. It's anyway. I have a lot more to say about that, but I forgot the main.
I posted a link to that essay in the chat for our video, so I definitely suggest everybody watching take a look at that. Let's see, there's just one more really good quote of yours I wanted to shout out there for people. It's sort of in the middle. Outside my daydreams, politics is self-abasement. It consists of the convoluted and humiliating process of surrendering power every 4 years. The only true power we have being to willfully disempower ourselves. We are told this is democracy. True democracy is the very inverse of this, our top-down system. Indeed, it is so opposite anything you and I have ever known that few outside my daydreams would recognize it. It has nothing to do with representatives or parties or campaigns or ossified ideologies or anything that takes place under the columns of some lobbyist-infested Senate. Real democracy comes from the stoop. It was born on the streets and in the courtyards and the workshops and in the fields, in the kitchens and in the classrooms. It sprang up in countless places at countless times all through history. And why? Because nothing was there to stop it. And though it has gone by many names throughout history, it is always the same, a mass of people coming together as equals to determine their own destiny. As it currently stands, this project has poked its head up under the name of municipalism. And then a little bit later you say, up to now, libertarian municipalism is a politics without a culture. For a long while, hip-hop has been a culture searching for a politics. The definitive urban culture and the superlative urban politics, if either of them is to succeed, it is here in the city where they must meet. With this union, we can begin to envision a society where hip-hop takes on a vital portion of the task of reforming our passive citizenship into one that is actively participatory, which is to say, a society where hip-hop forms the basis for a new paideia, another one of those dusty Greek words. What it means is an education intended to create engaged citizens. What the Greeks understood was that there is no political democracy without people capable of participating in it, and for them, curiously enough, citizenship began in the gymnasium. Under Athenian democracy, all education began with the training and articulation of the body and the senses, so as to appreciate rhythm, harmony, and form. Only then did it expand out into intellectual and political fields. If it is true that there is no political democracy, which is not first prefigured by cultural democracy, then paideia is the bridge which spans them. What gymnastics and poetry were to ancient education, DJing, b-girling, MCing, and graffiti writing can be today. Yeah, I just think that's incredibly cool. And I think it actually like does in a really good way kind of jump right at the heart of some of the divisions in like radical politics when this stuff was first getting formulated, like the so-called unbridgeable chasm between revolutionary and lifestyle anarchism or any of that stuff. It's like, I think, you know, it was a mistake to create that chasm when, you know, both sides kind of need each other. Like without revolutionary politics, cultural expression can't go anywhere, but without a cultural base and root, the revolutionary politics will kind of like shrivel up and die on its own side, or in some journal.
You need, I mean, no, this is the main thesis, I feel, of my essay is basically you need a democratic culture first before you can have a democratic politics. People don't know how to participate in politics democratically if they're not engaging each other on a whatever day-to-day basis, you know, just whatever, your friends, your neighbors in the street. If you don't know how to engage with those people democratically, you can't run a whole city democratically. You can't participate in even our terrible type of politics. It just, you know, it has to be imbued in the body in a lived way, in a way, you know, this is just one thing. I mean, you know, there's lots of other cultures that could possibly do this too, but my experience is with,
you know, it's all over the place.
So my experiences with hip hop and just You know, I mean, I just feel like my dealings with young people and everything have shown me that people really take to it, and it really kind of instills some really salutary democratic behaviors in people.
Mm-hmm. You got one, Wishbone?
Yeah, I actually have a couple things. One is, AK, you're talking about the aesthetic a lot, and
Yep.
For folks who don't watch ContraPoints, ContraPoints has one of her most recent videos is about political aesthetics, and it's really on point. I would recommend watching it. And the second thing is, AK, when you're talking about all this, like, you know, the kind of social aspect of like hip hop and all this stuff, I was kind of struck because like that also to me evokes kind of the history of like jazz music, and a lot of other like spoken word poetry too. And I'm like kind of curious, like your thoughts on like how this idea applies to like other musical forms and other forms of like spoken and like auditory art.
Well, to me, I mean, the breakdown is the idea of participation. You know, is your culture participatory? And you know, there's a lot of cultures that have a problem with this. You know, if we think about any kind of culture that is like, you know, I mean, I don't want to diss anybody's shit or anything. I mean, I love jazz music. Hell yeah, I love jazz music. But if you're going to a venue and you're in the crowd and you're looking at somebody on a stage and you're just watching, passively watching, that's not a democratic venue, you know? Basically, things that are performed, that there's a little bit of a problem there, a democratic problem there. And that's, our society is a society of, you know, spectatorship. And so you have a performer and you have the spectator, and there's a clear line between those two things.
Yeah.
And the spectator
I feel like
stays
it's
down
kind of like
in the
summed
pit.
up perfectly in the image of like some sort of like really bumping concert is going on, and there's just a bunch of like people standing around in the audience looking cool with their hands in their pockets and kind of like looking at each other awkwardly, being like, that's kind of like a metaphor for our society.
You know, yeah. And I mean, hip hop has that problem too, because people go and watch hip hop at a concert or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But it also has this other side, which is the really radically participatory side, which is the cipher, which is I can walk outside in my street and fucking hook up with my b-boy friends, and we can fucking start dancing right in the middle of the fucking street right now, and you can come join us. And if we don't let you in, or you feel scared to join our cipher, you can make another cipher. You can make one right over there. And you know, just whatever your style is, you can match up with people of the similar style, or whatever your level is, you can be with people at your same level. And you know, that cuts across with all the elements of hip hop. Graffiti. You want to paint. You don't have to go into a gallery. You don't have to get invited to a white wall gallery. Go outside and fucking scrawl your shit on a wall. You know, you wanna MC. It's the same thing. Cipher. Go into some pissy smelling hallway and start ciphering. What else? DJing. DJing is a little unique. It's a little bit of a, you know, you got to have a little bit of capital. You got to have some equipment and shit. But DJs really facilitate all that. And you know, it's the thing about DJing is that it's like the way Kool Herc was the guy who kind of invented the breakbeat, which is the beginning, the genesis of kind of hip hop. And you know, when he invented that breakbeat, he was just watching the dancers. He was just watching the people who came to dance. And he noticed that when he played that break, when he repeated that certain spot in the song, which is the break of the song, which is where just the drums are playing, people would just wig out and start going nuts.
Yeah.
So he didn't, you know, he wasn't authoritatively like pushing this on them. He was watching them, and they were dictating to him which part to play. You know, so it kind of decenters that relationship between spectator and performer. You know, it's like the DJ has to play what the people want, kind of. You know, there's a relationship. There's a relationship between them, organic relationship, kind of.
Right.
But
in the metaphor, it's kind of like, I don't know, I could almost see like the DJing is like, in sort of like a political metaphor, is like the DJ is kind of like the organization or organizations, you know, kind of like holding it down and providing a forum for people to express themselves through.
Yeah, and you know, I had trouble unpacking this in some of my writing because, you know, the main breakdown, like I said, between a novel or some of those old, dusty sort of spectacle type of mediums and hip hop is that, you know, one, you know, the novel is kind of like, it's delivered to you by this like squirreled away authoritarian, the author, who's like dictating to you and giving you their product. And hip hop is lived and participatory, and, you know, just, there's no leader or anything. But the one element that is a little authoritarian is the DJ. The DJ you know, has an authoritarian element to it, which is, you know, another problem that like the left has in general of like, are we going to be, you know, spontaneously organized? Or are we going to have some kind of cadre that's kind of putting things together? And it's a difficult question to solve. And, you know, I don't know, one of my resolutions to that is that I personally don't think that, you know, that you can't have that authoritarian element in politics, but you can maybe justify it in art. Art can be like a thing that launches a project, you know, and I don't know. I have to work through some of these ideas a little bit better, but
Totally. I've got that actually brings me to another thing I kind of wanted to discuss while we're on here, as a segue. It's a different article that we've got up on the website about some of the like kind of like tactical innovations developed by the Kurdish movement in Rojava in Turkey. Before we do that, I just wanted to check. Egg, do you have any comments on there you wanted to chime in with?
No, not really. I like the stuff about, you know, embodying your experience and like taking ownership that's more physical and live in you than, you know, having this intellectual kind of understanding of what you're supposed to do. I think that that's really important and would probably help with democracy. But
Right, like I know you and I have talked about this, and we've worked closely together often. It's just like being surrounded by intellectualism on the left can be kind of exhausting for people like you and I who are more like artistically inclined, or I don't know what you call us, like an intuitive sort of person, rather than a hyper rational theoretical kind of person.
yeah,
Those conversations are kind of some things I saw expressed in that writing, and it's something I've been trying to do, is like through some of my work in DU, is like running the 24/7 hip hop beats to chill relax study 2 group we've got going, basically just trying to like build up some like musical aesthetic and like lexicon for new politics, and like bring that together in a way that people can converse about ideas and feelings together without having to like steep it in, you know, really intense language, because people communicate through music even more than we communicate through words in a lot of ways.
yeah. I think something recently about democracy that comes up with art too is like the, you know, feeling like maybe you're going to be wrong, and then people
Right.
might push you away and you won't be able to participate as well. So I think that the opportunity to understand how to be wrong or how to change your mind is an important piece of that. And, you know, art can't be wrong, and you can't be wrong necessarily. Like you might have ideas that aren't going to be as effective, but learning to build those together in community is an important part of it.
Totally.
I don't
That's
know.
awesome. Yeah, kind of the thing I wanted to transition to talking to was some innovations in terms of like tactical use of municipalism and applications in the real world, like ongoing ones. One thing that we've got up on our website is this article some other comrades wrote called Fighting Form Beyond the Party in Kurdistan. And it's basically this essay that's taking a look at the political history and composition of the movement for democratic autonomy in Kurdistan, both in Turkey and in Syria, and some of the really interesting things it adds to kind of the application of libertarian municipalist politics. Because what it involves is a really, really diverse array of institutions fighting on all fronts for different focuses. Everything from the HDP in Turkey, which is a mainstream sort of like democratic socialist slash municipalist political party, which holds seats in Congress and is fighting on that front, to groups like the PYD, who are holding it down in Rojava, or the militias, or different Kurdish youth groups. And just kind of how those things can all work together towards a common goal without sort of engaging in the usual like sectarian infighting that happens between different strategic or tactical preferences between groups. So yeah, I had a quote I wanted to pull from there, so bear with me here. They talk a little bit, there we go. A central lesson has been the ability to create pluralistic organizational form that endures over time and intervenes across multiple fields and terrains of struggle. What we see here is not a rigidity of form or an overvaluation of any single site of struggle, be it economic, parliamentary, civil, etc. Rather, there is an understanding that fields of struggle are not mutually exclusive. The configurations of organization visible in Rojava and Bakur point to a possible way forward. Its organizational form engages political subjectivities that offer identifications beyond national or micro-identities. Whether feminism or anti-racism are the most appropriate frames through which a political movement will be united cannot be answered by us at this point. For the Kurdish liberation movement, feminism is no longer understood as a way to liberate only women, but society as a whole. The nation-state, constructed upon a genealogy of patriarchy, must be overcome, and struggle against patriarchy and capital are in unison. This understanding answers a question that is at the root of many problems we face in the global north. Who is our political subject? The parentheses white, male industrial worker that united the left for many decades is no longer the mass subject, nor does this subjectivity capture the many levels of oppression we face. By combining feminism with anti-nationalism, a new promising political subjectivity is created. It must be understood that the left in the global north, especially in the US, is in a period of political recomposition. Neoliberalism, repression, and hegemony of lifestylist, spontaneous, and single-issue politics have created a left that lacks the kind of organizational, educational, and cultural infrastructures that the Kurdish liberation movement has been able to maintain for decades. Hence, to imagine that at this moment broad sectors of the left in the US are capable of co-defining a horizon as long-term as democratic autonomy and democratic confederalism is unrealistic. The separation of our knowledges and understandings is too great to think so far into such a cohesive tomorrow. The more reasonable yet desirable endeavor would be to co-define a common mid-set of reforms that would aim to create a better position for all the actors that form the potential assemblage. If we are to have a fighting chance, we must be able to co-define a set of objectives that has meaningful relevance to the multitudes. Just skipping ahead a little bit here. In Kurdistan, they talk about, here is a fighting form that is ideologically flexible, strategically disciplined, and tactically diverse. Organizations like the HDP commit themselves to an electoral path, but at the same time, stand up for autonomous youth brigades who choose to fight, for example, the police directly in the streets. The tactics are diverse. The actors communicate directly with one another, trying to complement each other's work as they walk together towards the horizon they've co-defined. I don't know if y'all have read that essay before, but just curious what sort of thoughts in terms of like, I don't know, the kind of like tactical innovations of libertarian municipalism and the way it fits into the culture, that the kind of culture that we're building, and the idea of complementarity between strategies and theories and all that sort of thing.
The first thing that's like kind of sprang to my mind immediately was seeing a lot of collaboration in the U.S. right now between the DSA and IWW, which is, is I think a really important and interesting kind of like relationship, and that like DSA is pretty kind of fractious, right? And a lot of different elements within it, which is totally fine. But there's, they coexist under this like kind of understanding, like we all have this kind of semi-clear goal that we're working towards. And you have the segments of DSA who work on electoral politics, which is getting a lot of attention right now. But there's also so many parts of DSA who like don't give a shit about electoralism and are funneling people into unions like the IWW, and kind of like back and forth types of organizations, both directly combating capital in the workplace, while also starting to build like take steps towards liberated institutions in the community and working with various types of like moral things to maybe get some of that, make things a little bit easier.
Right, and the trick will be to figure out if we can actually hold that balance together without anybody kind of like stabbing each other in the back or, trying to dominate. I think that's kind of what the writing about the movement in Kurdistan is kind of showing, is like, if you can keep those sort of like competing preferences for organizing, and you can keep them united around some sort of shared culture or underlying, base of struggle, it leads to a more just sort of like fruitful, diverse kind of politics, that one where the the parliamentarists who are trying to like win this or that reform are also going to show up for the youth movements fighting police in the streets or fighting fascists in Syria. And I don't think we're there yet, but maybe it's possible if if the odds are in our favor, we'll get there. Especially if we build a good culture, if we build like a a life cult to fight back against all the death cults out there. And I think a lot of the debates that come up between different tendencies right now are, a lot of them are sort of historically based, or they're based in competing preferences for tactics. But if we can all at least agree that what we want to do is build a base to create a revolutionary dual power and generally not fuck with each other and get in each other's way, we might have a chance. And I think that would be a lot better than left unity would just sort of be, not ideological unity, but at least some sort of like tactical agreement to not fuck with each other's shit and to actually get to the point where we're powerful enough that we can actually start, that our criticisms and comments start having meaning.
I want to kind of like point to something you said, Ursula, about the life cult. And connect that with what you said, what the part of the passage you read about feminism, at least my understanding of it, and for clarity, I am a white dude. But this idea that like we can't just like, I'm really compelled by social reproduction, right? And the life cult, like being able to celebrate like the like children and the continuing on of like biological life and like our relatives and our neighbors. It's something that like it takes, because we're so patriarchal, like it takes so much fighting against within some of these institutions that we've mentioned already. Like it can be really hard. I'm trying to build the life cult within my union, and it's fucking hard. People are so bought into battle and fighting, and the death cult that we kind of like joke about. So I just kind of wanted to get that out there and like mention that kind of as a tension, or something that I think it would be beneficial for all of us to focus on a little bit.
Totally. Yeah, just shouting out to the audience out there, in the spirit of the cipher and all that. Hit us up with any comments or questions, and we'll talk about them on the air while we're out here. Just drop it in the chat or drop it in the comments section. We'll probably go on for, I don't know, how much longer do y'all want to be on? 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 15
How
minutes?
long has it been?
We've been on an hour and 20 minutes. Yeah, pretty good, huh?
Yeah. Well, I got like two kind of problematics or questions.
Yeah, bring it on.
I want to talk more about the life cult and everything. I'm not sure how to formulate a statement on that though.
Hey, one sec. I actually gotta go.
Oh, Egg's gotta go.
Yeah, my machine is dead, but
Eggs.
those are good chats, y'all.
Yeah.
Peace.
Peace out. Yeah, the life cult is just kind of like a weird phrase that we've been playing with.
No, I'm 100% with it. That's my preoccupation with culture too, like culture. There's cultures of life and there's cultures of
death.
Yeah.
I think it might be beneficial for folks who are listening if we kind of like
break it down,
kind of describe both of those things a little bit.
Yeah. I don't remember exactly where the death cult thing. I think a couple of us are fans of the Seriously Wrong podcast. They talk about death cults as like this sort of thing. Like it happens all over the place in politics and culture, where it's just the death drive personified. Like capitalism is a death cult. Like university can be a death cult. The workplace can be a death cult. Anything where the primary like cultural drive is just towards kind of like death or turning living things into dead things, into products or things to be consumed and destroyed. We live in a death cult in a big way, and a lot of spaces on the left can also be death cults. Really bad ways where they just take individuals and grind them up into dust and break you down so that you follow the party line, or are never, you're properly castigated for being uneducated and problematic. And kind of when we were talking about starting DU is like we would just start chanting life cult, because that's what we want it to be. Is we want to be start creating some radical culture that can actually allow us to live in a better society.
Yeah. I have I don't know. I have a different kind of idea of the word reactionary. I've been using this word for a long time, and I've probably been using it the wrong way for a long time, because I've never really thought of reactionaryism as just a phenomenon on the right, or the way people normally use it is just a knee-jerk phrase for anything on the right that is, kind of regressive type of thinking. But the way I kind of use it is any type of culture based around reacting against what it doesn't like. I don't know if that might be a controversial way of thinking about it, but
it's an interesting one.
Yeah, well, I mean, an example to me, and I don't want to offend anybody here, but like Antifa. Like just if you look at the word Antifa, it's anti-fascism. It's already set itself up as what it doesn't want to be. We agree that we don't like fascism, but to kind of base your identity around what you don't like, and this goes for a lot of things. Any post-ism.
Right, post-isms.
It's already
Post
in a reactionary kind of way of thinking of like, all right, well, let's just think about what we don't like and what we want to tear down. And not just no thinking about what we want to replace it. And I don't know, my personal philosophy is that if you're thinking about what you want in place of the thing you don't want, you don't have to tear down the thing you don't want. You can, if you make your idea, your replacing idea better and more beautiful and more, practical than the existing idea, it'll just replace that idea. You don't have to like tear down. So I don't know. That's my personal definition of reactionary, and I kind of lump that type of thinking in with the death cult type of thinking. It's like, we're people who are too fixated on what they want to destroy and not fixated enough on what they want to create or how they want to live, So I don't know. I don't mean to lump people into this, I don't want to put people in the death cult, but it's something for people to think about. I don't know, a little bit to make sure that you're not like stuck in that rut of deconstructiveness, basically.
Yeah. I think that's totally on point there, AK. And I think that's like, to circle back to like what makes like DU compelling. Like, I think that's something that's super compelling about DU, right? Like, many of us participate in, combating fascism, right? But the whole like aesthetic, the idea of the green mask, right? Like, and like the stuff that we do at these mobilizations, right? Is like, yes, we're going to fight fascism, but we're also going to try to plant seeds of these things that we want to grow. We don't want to just be focused on smashing fascism. We want to be focused on also growing, a liberated community and a liberated ecosystem that we live within. And like, I see that a lot in various leftist groups, like, the death cult. Like, the death cult is so fucking real. Like, how many times have all of us heard the phrase like, "Oh, I can't wait till I bathe in the blood of the bourgeoisie," or like, some shit like that. It's just like, it's just super fucking violent. Like, that's not.
Any like normal person will see somebody going on about that and be like, "Whoa, these people! I don't know about this. I don't know if I want a part of that." And sometimes I'm like, "Oh, yeah, maybe I need to like back off and like,
Yeah,
I think
there's a lot of people on the left really are driven by like revenge fantasy, and it's understandable. A lot of people get put through terrible humiliation in their just everyday working lives and shit, and I understand that. But yeah, you're just killing yourself if you think like that all the time. Just like, oh, I just want to fucking strangle my boss right now.
Right. And revenge doesn't nourish your spirit.
In a lot of ways, like, that strategy and think that like the revenge fantasy, aka, was like, that's fun. You said that and my mind just like lit up. I was like, holy shit, that's so true. But also like, you know, I see this as kind of like refusing to play the game, right? Like in a sense, like, you know, kind of like historical Marxism is like fallen into the same like kind of social patterns that like capitalism falls in. It's like fight, compete, right? Like we're going to compete against capitalism for a better system.
Yeah, reactionary. You know, that's what I would define as reactionary.
Yeah, and I think like, you know, in my personal interactions with you know, folks who tend to be kind of used to like a lot of like other white guys, when you don't play the game, that's when they get the most pissed, because like you're just like represent a totally alternative universe that they have no conception of.
Yeah.
And like that's when you know that you're winning. Well, there I go. Like I'm falling into it again, but like that's how you know that you're making some progress, you know?
Mm-hmm. Rusty says on the chat there, says, would you say that the revenge fantasy is recentering oneself as opposed to the community? What do you think?
Recentering oneself?
Yeah, I think sort of like what they mean, I think, is would you say the revenge fantasy is sort of like emphasizing the self, like your own sort of like
Dignity, yeah, kind of asserting yourself.
Yeah, or like putting yourself above people.
Well, I mean, it's not going to be a social project, right? If it's already using or thinking about revenge and violence and shit, it's already just the ends and the means have already been totally obliterated. They're not connected anymore. If you're using violent means to achieve your so-called, you know, future peaceful society, it's not gonna work out. I don't know. I don't know if that answers, if that's like along the lines of the question, but like, yeah, I don't know. People, dignity is a big thing, and self-respect and confidence and shit. And yeah, some people feel like they need to destroy the current system to kind of get that back and everything. And I guess, I don't know, that's a problem. It needs to be worked out. But there's other ways of empowering yourself. There's other means of empowering yourself. You know, it's like I think Montesquieu said something like the only way to arrest power is through your own power or whatever. I don't know what the quote is exactly, but you need power to arrest power.
Right, and Arendt's all about that too. Hannah Arendt, right? You know,
Yeah.
her conception of power is really like power and authority are opposites. Where there's more authority, people have less power.
Yeah. No, yeah, that's an important distinction.
I'm going to drop a little tweet here.
One more thing on that point. I wanted to clean up that that you don't need the same type of power to arrest power. You know, you don't have to use violence to combat violence. You can use a different type of power to combat another type of power. That's all I had to say on that.
There's another thing since we were talking about Seriously Wrong podcast and how they kind of got us on this topic. They've got one of my favorite tweets out there is message to my enemies: when the revolution comes, you're not just gonna get the wall, buddy. You're gonna get 4 walls, a roof, clean clothes, good food, education, and quality healthcare, because that's what every human being alive deserves.
Yeah,
that's life cult shit right there.
Let's do it.
Yeah, although I will say on the topic of destroying things, there are a few things out there that just by the very nature of their destruction would be creative in some senses. Like most institutions of statecraft come to mind as being like, well, if prisons were just abolished overnight, it would automatically be better than them continuing to exist, or like the military or something like that. But it's a whole different kind of destruction than what people are talking about, where they're like, "Oh, I'm so tough, I'm so badass. I punched 10 cops. How many cops did you punch, you loser?"
And like, you know, it kind of to what AK was just saying, like about different types of power, like, or like in terms of like violent coercive power, like you can't compete against the state, right? Like you can't destroy like U.S.
Right.
base with like a bunch of like ragtag group of like people, right? It's like no, that's gonna the only way that can be destroyed is by social power and like the power of the people to push for abolition of the military and nuclear weapons and stuff like that.
I always say the state is like the One Ring. You can use it, but it's gonna bite you in the ass and subvert you eventually. So the best you can do is like maybe carry it for a little while, but make damn sure it gets thrown in the volcano before it takes over your soul.
Yeah. Well, I'm my personal thought on that is like you said, I mean, not only do we not have the power to physically dismantle the state, and not only would it destroy us in the process, it would disconnect our ends from means, and we wouldn't be the same thing anymore. Like I said, you can't achieve a peaceful society through violence. It's always gonna fuck it up. I mean, that's my critique of Rojava too. I love Rojava and everything, but I'm worried about Rojava's future because of just circumstances that are out of their control. They're in a violent whirlwind there, and it's once you participate in that type of thing, it's difficult. So, I mean, my personal thought on this is that you have to domesticate the state first. So that's where art comes in. You can't really achieve a social society if you're in a fascist society. You have to have domesticated your state to a certain degree, where we have a pretty domesticated state here. We're lucky. We have a lot of freedom of expression as far as art goes and stuff like that.
Yeah, compared to Assad's Syria, for example.
Absolutely, So you have to, and the tool is art. The more we push artistic types of attitudes, different attitudes through art, the more we can kind of domesticate the state away from those repressive types of strategies, and have a better chance of establishing something peacefully. Because if you do have a fascist state, you have no other option but violence. And I don't know. It's like I said, your means are already kind of fucked there.
Yeah, and bringing it back to municipalism too, that reminds me of a good point. Like one of the things that I really thought rung true about the strategy of municipalism when I first started learning about it was like, just like from studying different like revolutionary movements, being like, God damn, most of these turned into civil wars, and then what then that leads is like, then you necessarily, to like survive the civil war, need like military command structure, and then the political institutions that are going to come out of that are going to be pretty militaristic in nature, and that's how you get Bolsheviks and all kinds of like reactionary militaristic governments. Is like, so it's like, I was just like thinking like, damn, is there really no way to separate revolution and civil war? And that's one of the things that municipalism at least spoke to the potential of maybe being able to do, is like, there's can we, is there any way to sort of defang, or as you say, like domesticate the most horrific and harmful aspects of the state while building something alternative and potentially counter to it that can then contest for power in a dual power kind of situation and bring about an actual revolution that doesn't end up falling to rule by the meanest, biggest, nastiest people who are willing to, wave a red flag around.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
I think that's the issue with Rojava. Rojava is like, their philosophy is peaceful, but they got caught up in a civil war because they were facing down a fucking, evil fascist dictator state. And really, there was and a bunch of fascist offshoot military movements of various sorts. So they really had no choice but to fight in self-defense. But it's a corner that I think us in like the U.S. or like North America ought to be thinking about, is like all the time we're like, yeah, that's the revolution right there. When we pick up the guns and fight, it was like, no, actually, that's like the bad scenario that tends to sink revolutions and make everybody miserable for the rest of time. And if there's any way to avoid that while actually carrying out a revolution, then we ought to be doing everything we can to do that. So that means like reintegrating our social relations and not, blowing the whole thing up, and actually like trying to meet people where they're at and bring them into a life cult that isn't likely to spiral off into death and destruction and violence. Like self-defense, I still believe is like an absolute necessity, but it's a necessity of last resort rather than, an actual strategy for changing the world and bringing about 10,000 years of utopian peace and happiness, which I think is what the left is about. At least that's what I hope it's about.
That's what most people say.
Yeah. So yeah, I've always felt like, if you really want Rojava to succeed, what you need to do is stay where you are and revolutionize your own political situation so that you can become an ally to them where they are.
Yeah.
I mean, I like that people go off and help in solidarity and fighting and everything, but really the most of the reason why Syria is so fucked up right now is because of the larger geopolitical situation, which is the United States and Russia and all that shit. And if we had taken care of our shit here, they would have a better chance there. They wouldn't be in as much of a mess there. The Arab Spring could have taken off. It could have been much better.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I have pretty intense critiques of violence. I think it's a real red line. Violence. I mean, I understand they have to use. There's certain situations in which it's the only option for your life, to preserve your life. You need to take up arms. That's 100% understandable. But once you start that situation, it just creates this whirlwind of like unforeseeable outcomes, and it creates all kinds of backlash and shit that you create enemies sometimes through this process. And if you look at the rise of fascism, basically it arose as a backlash against left revolutionism.
Yeah.
So we got to on the left, we have to be really careful about this. We have to be really careful about how we deploy ourselves so that we don't create all these whirlwinds of backlash against ourselves. How we define ourselves, making sure that we're not excluding people or making people out to be the villain in our narrative of history and shit. You unnecessarily push people into these situations they don't even want to be in, but they can't participate in our narrative because we set them aside as the bad guys. So what else do they have? They have to be the bad guys. So I just feel like we gotta be careful about this type of narrative building of our stories, and obviously really careful about how we deploy defense and violence and stuff. Yeah, and that kind of brings me back. One of the things I wanted to like wrap things up on was like a little chat on Demand Utopia and our kind of place in the libertarian municipalist like strategic ecosystem. How does what we do complement a strategy for a better society, etc. Kind
kind of what you're saying there gave me some thoughts, like the ideas on violence. It's like kind of what a lot of the stuff that everybody out there who, you know, sees what we're doing online or whatever, or in the streets, kind of what they're seeing is kind of a smoke screen or a performance in a lot of senses. Like,
Aesthetic.
oh, big secret's out. It's kind of a smoke screen. But like, you know, wearing one of these, or like, you know, doing crazy stuff in the street, or, you know, posting strange music and images online to get people's brains, you know, neurons firing in some way or another, or trying to adapt different, like, you know, memes and cultural traits and stuff. That's all sort of a smoke screen. Is like, you know, what we're trying to do is take that desire for a sort of like militant or like hardcore revolutionary thing, you know, like, oh, they got ski masks on or whatever, and then sort of like take that energy and redirect it into the life cult, into the music and the art and the base building in your apartment building, or your neighborhood or your workplace, and actually start bringing people into something. Like, this is a thing that just gets people's attention. They see that and like, whoa, who's that freaky alien who's, you know, looks like he's about to rob my store or something, or, you know, beat up a Nazi. But then we come out there swinging with sunflower balloons and all kinds of nutty stuff. It subverts people's expectations. It makes them curious. It makes them confused. It makes them want to know more and like get a little something of what we got. And it's just a way of like visually representing the life cult politics that we're trying to be about in our, I would say, our actual organizing work, like organizing popular assemblies, you know, movements to reclaim public space, all sorts of stuff that all the various people repping the DU style are kind of engaged in their everyday. That's my thoughts on that.
I
Yeah,
gotta
in our
say, one of the things that drew me in was like, I love absurdist art, and DU is basically one giant absurdist performance art.
Yeah. Yeah, like one way I got municipalist with it when we were first starting to rock the alien masses. There was a fracking blockade, a blockade of materials going to fracking fields in my town, and people were like camped out on some railroad tracks. They're blocking it, and I went into the city council to give public testimony against it, you know, like in their comment section, whatever. But when I got up there, I dropped this thing over my face. I could see all the councilors like, oh, freak out, tense up, and just be like, hey, I'm an ambassador from the, you know, the Martian Utopian Federation here. I'm just on Earth, and I'm just here to say, don't fuck with these people. We made the mistake 1,000 years ago of fucking with people who are trying to protect the Earth, and it really screwed us over. You look at our planet; it's an inhospitable desert now. We live underground, and we only recently just figured out how to live together in harmony. So, you know, don't sick the cops. They ended up sicking the cops anyways, but, you know, it got in the paper. I don't know.
I think that's a much better meme than "What's Up, Bootlickers Guy."
Right? Yeah. What's up, bootlickers guy? Oh man. Yeah. What's up, Earthlings instead?
Do you have any more questions from comments or chat?
Comments from the chat. Let's see. No, not yet. Yeah, maybe just like give us some thoughts on like how you see Demand Utopia being complementary to municipalism. Like, I know we're all about like kind of the show and the absurdism, but we're all doing real work, engaged at the same time. And like, how do you feel like that being part of DU like kind of helps you carry on with that and feel like you're having an impact?
One thing that I can really speak to immediately is that I was recently very involved in a union drive, and I like came to this job like, looking for some income because I was fucking broke. And, made a lot of good friends and comrades while we were doing this union drive. And, I started finding that like people who were my coworkers and fellow workers were really receptive to like a lot of the stuff that I was talking about like, the life cult and like
Geshy gang.
the Geshy gang. But just like, the idea of like, unions and the labor movement historically has been pretty fucking patriarchal. And I think Ursula, you mentioned that like, it's been the realm of like the white male industrial worker, right? And it's again, it's focused like so many people in unions are focused on fighting, right? Fighting and combat and like this idea of like we're gonna like kill the bosses, right? And I'm always there being like, that's great. Like I'm glad that we are like standing up and defending ourselves against this repression, but where's the party? Like when are we gonna celebrate? Like
where's the music? Who's got the food?
Yeah. I was like, I keep pushing. I'm just like, so when are we like, let's have a barbecue, let's have a party, like let's hang out, let's have joyous, like loving relationships, because like that's what to me a union is all about, right?
Everybody out there listening, I'm trying to get a hashtag going with the DU Twitter account. So y'all know combat liberalism, right? Like Mao and how everything he doesn't like is liberalism. I say we gotta hashtag combat loneliness. That's what it's all about. We're all so fucking alienated from each other, even from our comrades who we're close to. That's the real work. Building the life cult is combating loneliness, and that's how we're gonna make libertarian municipalism a viable strategy. Is if people come to it and say like, "Wow, this is filling the giant fucking gaping hole in my heart where all these meaningful social relationships ought to be." That's right. Combat loneliness. Sorry to interject there.
No, it's cool.
Yeah, the experience with the unions is a big thing. And like for us, it was like when we first started DU, it was about finding a way to like represent our ideas as a coherent kind of like block within these popular assemblies that we started, which we soon like realized kind of the cultural prefiguration issue was afoot. Like we had a lot of people who wanted to do something and were really jazzed on the idea of forming neighborhood assemblies to do mutual aid and direct action in all sorts of cities around the place. But we really weren't there in terms of like the culture and the education and like the solidarity between people that we needed to really keep that thing up. Like it's a form that we've seen pop up in basically every revolutionary movement in history, the commune, the neighborhood assembly or any of that stuff. But I think kind of what we were missing in our analysis was like, well, there actually needs to be the culture that allows something like that to arise when the conditions are ripe. And we had the ripe conditions, but we didn't have the culture built in time. So that's sort of what DU came as an antidote for. AK, I know you do some work in like you work with youth and stuff, right? How does the political side influence the organizing or just the day-to-day that you do?
Well, not really at the moment. This is the difficulty, the chasm I'm trying to bridge. But I mean, there's an ethic in hip hop that is just each one teach one, and if you really, I mean, basically anybody who really loves anything, they're gonna want to do it for no money, and share it with people and expand it, and so I don't know. My goal is to create like an ecosystem cultural ecosystem. And you know, because I'm part of a crew. I'm part of a b-boy crew, and you know, we go to jams together, and we battle and cipher and all that shit. And but you know, there's not a lot of that going on where I am. I'm kind of in like the backwoods area of New York. I'm in New York, and you know, New York City's got a lot of shit going on, but where I am, not a lot. So, and you know, I'm around Albany, and hip hop is kind of dead here. It's just not a scene here at all, really. I mean, as far as b-boying goes, it's just kind of me and my crew, and I don't know. I feel like people here could really benefit from it, and you know, it could become the basis of definitely a different democratic type of lifestyle. And you know, the way jams are is like they're kind of federations. You know, it's like you confederate with other crews, and you get together, and you can have people from all the fucking world come to your jam. So it's already got that kind of confederalist type of attitude, internationalist type of attitude.
Well, that's the thing, is like, I think, you know, in some of the like theoretical side of like communalism and that sort of politic, is like there's the assumption that it's nothing new. It's just a summary of something that arises naturally in human society when we're relatively free of hierarchy and domination in our relationships to each other. As humans will naturally tend to you know, confederate and socialize non-hierarchically and organize our economies and politics that way. As that's something I'm really interested in with DU and other stuff, is just like fucking like busting open this like, you know, academic sectarian gatekeeping shit that goes on everywhere, and being like, well, let's find examples of this stuff that we're trying to represent in everyday life. Like, rather than saying like, hey, everybody out there, you've got to adopt an entirely new lifestyle and outlook, and you've got to learn all these fancy new words, yada yada yada. Be like, hey, look at what you're already doing, and see, and just try to imagine how you know, take it a couple steps further, like how that could actually look like what a free society might behave like in some way or another. Like the music you're playing, the stories you're writing, the work that you're doing, like it's not like a giant leap that we have to do. It's small steps in terms of our thinking of like, you know, what does freedom look like and how do we behave? It's like, well, we already do it. We just have to you know, figure out how to release these fucking constraints that put on things that we're already doing.
Yeah, you know, I mean, everybody, it's about finding your passion. If there's something you feel passionately about, you've already got the germ of a community there. You know, you have something to gather around, and out of that, any type of passion, you can already, you know, you can start to form these type of cultural relationships that can bleed out into political relationships and have social consequences.
Yeah, okay, that reminds me so strongly of when that community of people who are passionate about video games was, you know, I don't know if it was co-opted or if it was mobilized by the fascists to repress and harass and issue death threats to women who are in the video game industry. Like,
yeah,
you know, that's fucked up. But also, like, you know, I like what I learned from that as someone who like was a very big fan, and still am in a lot of ways a really big fan of video games as an artistic medium and narrative medium, and you know, that stuff. Like, that showed me that there is a lot of power there, right? There's a lot of community And like, of course, like this is a fucked up form of community, like kind of like Nazis are a really fucked up community. But like, I heard there's a really great quote that I heard Yanis Varoufakis say once. It was something like, behind every fascism or Nazism is a failed revolution.
Damn.
And that's like what, the cultural movement of Gamergate kind of speaks to me.
We got our Nazis now because we failed to put together something good that fills that hole in people's heart.
Yeah.
And in their pocket.
Yeah.
So let's do it. I think we're coming up right on the end here. Got a couple minutes left. Yeah, I don't know. Any last comments, questions, shout outs you want to put out there into the void?
Well, you're gonna help me with that manifesto, right, bro?
Yeah. The
Cool.
arts manifesto.
Yeah, hopefully we'll have something for, I don't know. I'm working together here, hopefully we can make some kind of democratically conceived thing that will advance this this artistic kind of revolutionary type of thinking. That's what DU is working on, a manifesto right now, artist manifesto. And yeah, I don't know, look for that in the future.
I want to shout out to all our utopians who are not here tonight.
Yeah, and all our utopian viewers.
Yeah, y'all rock. Being part of this community is like super wholesome, and I love it. And just being able to discuss, the critical nature of like the, people who gather at like public parks is just at any time just fucking dope. I love it.
Hell yeah. All right. Rusty Mars says, thank you so much for this broadcast. Love it. We love you, Rusty.
Love
Flame
you,
Garden, thanks y'all. This was rad. Roldy, love you, Roldy. Yeah, it was better than reading alone in my room too. Thanks. Yeah, I mean, yeah, we're wrapping it up here, but just like, shout outs to all the utopians, all the people in the struggle, bring the life cult wherever you are. You don't gotta wear a green mask to do it. Just bring the life cult, rep the Geshi gang. Hit up demandutopia.net if you want to get any like buttons or swag or any of that shit. Sell them at your hip hop show, your punk rock show. Hand them out to your friends. We got stickers, all that shit, whatever you like. Yeah, just stay tuned. Like, get with your neighbors, start scheming. Check out the Seriously Wrong podcast if you want to listen to a lot more hours of people talking about utopian things. All right. I think that's a wrap, y'all.
Cool. That was fun, man.
Yeah, that was great. Love talking to y'all.
Peace out from B-Boy AK.
Hey, peace out, AK. All right. And that's a wrap. Peace to y'all. Keep it real. And, never stop loving, never stop fighting. Life cult, life cult. Good night.